I've sat here with this typed out for an hour debating if I should post it. Sorry if it's stupid and not creepy. This is my first post. First off, I call him the psychological stalker because he really messed with my head, depriving me of sleep and seriously terrifying me even to this day. I'll start at the beginning, 2011 to 2012. I lived in Utah for several years and moved several times due to my dad's work and other circumstances that don't matter. My family is Christian. I am not, but I still attend their church because it makes my mom happy. I made a friend in the congregation who was a year younger than me, Zach. Zach was one of the realest people I've ever met, and we got along very well. The summer was about halfway through. We spent almost every single night playing night games with people from the church. We all lived on the same street except for Zach, who lived up the very steep hill. Still not too far though. Nearing the end of the summer, the night games slowed down and were only once a week. The rest of the time I was hanging out with Zach at his house only up the hill from mine. Enough distance for exactly 11 street lamps. I Google mapped it. One night, around 2 a.m., I was walking back when I saw a very tall man on the opposite side of the road from one of the street lamps, the faded light resting just out of reach of his feet. Totally dark. I couldn't see anything but that he was tall, very tall. I could only assume he was at least 7 feet. I switched sides of the road so I was away from him. He turned as I walked past to watch me. At this point, I remember my rule to always carry a knife on me. I reached in my pocket to make sure my trusty spring-loaded knife was in my pocket, and sure enough it was. As I passed him, I got about 40 feet down the road from him, and he started walking behind me, keeping the distance of what I assume was about 40 feet. When I stopped, he did. He didn't get any closer than that. As this totally creeped me out but didn't really harm me, I disregarded it and went to bed, not telling my mom the next morning. The next day I told Zach what happened and hung out with Zach as normal. Had night games and went to his house for a movie. When it ended around 1:30 a.m., I walked home again, this time relieved to not find the man standing there. I walked down the hill like normal, only to turn around with a creeping feeling, only to find the man behind me, the normal 40 feet away on the opposite side of the road, switching sides back and forth so he never stepped under the street lamps. This continued for a week, 40 feet away. Every time I walked home from Zach's house, on the Monday of the second week, he got closer. This started to really scare me. I had told my mom after the second incident and decided to tell her again. She put it off like she does with most things, reassuring me that the neighborhood is safe and if anything happened, I could scream and our neighbors would charge out with guns, which they have actually done before. Another week later, he got closer, this time only 10 feet from me. This time on the same side of the street as me, but switching sides on the road every time I passed under a street light as normal. This was the first time I ever got a look at him. His hat shadowed his face, and all I could see was his sunken cheeks. I stopped while he was on the same side of the street and turned around, knowing he wouldn't get closer, and I asked him, "Who are you?" forcefully. No response. I pointed my knife in his direction and said, "I'm a Boy Scout. I've killed things with a knife, and I won't have a problem stabbing a man I feel threatened by." All he did was sigh and stand there. The first sound I ever heard him make, a freaking sigh, and yet it gave me goosebumps and scared the heck out of me. I stepped forward to see him better, but he jumped back. I stepped another step and he took a couple back. I considered running at him, but instead put my knife away and ran as fast as I could home, only looking over my shoulder once to see him wave at me as I ran. I got home and didn't sleep the entire night. Called Zach early the next morning and told him everything that had happened. He freaked out and said I needed to call the cops, but I refused and just tried to brush it off. That is when things got worse. He started appearing in the middle of the day. I would be outside skating or longboarding, far enough away I couldn't see any details, and whenever I went towards him, he would turn and run away. I never got close enough to see who he was. This made me break down and freak out. Why the heck was he doing this? Zach insisted we tell someone, but I stupidly refused. He stopped following me from Zach's house at night. Awesome, right? Wrong. So very wrong. This messed with my head. This absence scared me more than his presence. Where was he? Was he watching me? Is he near me? Is he going to try and grab me? Not knowing where he was more terrifying than ever before. Even now I'm shaking while typing this, just thinking about that night not seeing him. I didn't see him for 4 nights in a row, and Zach convinced me he was gone. Weeks went by and I returned to my normal life. We moved houses across the main road from that house, literally a 5-minute walk from the old one. Very close, still walking distance to Zach. School started and winter came. Winter break started. I hadn't seen Zach in a while, so I called him up and we decided to hang out. The day went by as normal and I went back home. No stalker in sight. It got really hot in my room, so I decided to crack the window just a little bit, letting the cold air seep in. I only planned to keep it open for a minute or two. I turned around to face my bookshelf, as I am a procrastinator and still hadn't unpacked my boxes of books. Then the single most terrifying thing that has ever happened to me occurred. I remember it so clearly. Wearing my Jack the Pumpkin King pajamas and a job for a cowboy metal band shirt, holding my favorite book, To Kill a Mockingbird, it happened. From behind me outside the window, I heard a familiar sound. The sigh. My blood went cold and my heart stopped, and I literally stopped breathing. I was paralyzed with fear. I quickly spun around, my eyes tearing up, to see an evil smile with sunken cheeks that I will never be able to get out of my mind. He ran away from the window with a laughter that echoes in my mind as I type this. I ran over and slammed and locked the window. I screamed, and the next thing I remember is waking up on the floor with my mom next to me, saying she heard my window slamming, a scream, and something hit the ground really hard. After that, I never saw him again. Years have passed, and I still think of him. I check the locks on my doors and windows. A gun near my bed. A knife is always in my pocket. So this story takes place in Fayetteville, North Carolina, near Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where I went to college 4 years ago. Anybody who is familiar with the area knows that Fayetteville has a large population of homeless vets near the base, also known locally as Vietnam. I had just turned 20 years old and had moved out of the house for college over 2 hours away. I had previously worked at a nursing home for 2 years, so I have a special place in my heart for the struggling elderly. My roommate Mel and I had moved into a little apartment near the college and bought a rinky-dink washer and dryer set off of Craigslist. Well, the washer didn't last a week until it went out, and we had to start using a laundromat. My roommate was busy with homework, so I offered to do his laundry for him if he would do mine next week, and he agreed. So I grabbed the bag of laundry accessories, my phone, school books, about $15 in quarters, and our clothes in a dirty hamper and left. The layout of the laundromat was at the front of the store. There were 2 rows of washers and then 2 rows of dryers near the back, then dryers on the walls on the left-hand side near the front. There were 2 tables kitty-corner to each other, one at the front left-hand side and one at the back right-hand side, then chairs lining the left of the walls. At the laundromat, I threw all of our laundry into a machine and pulled out one of my books for a school to start studying. I was sitting at the table closest to the exit towards the front. Out of the corner of my eye, a woman with a child is sitting down on the chairs to the left, and I see an elderly man with a military hat standing in the middle aisle, getting frustrated with the machine. It was really hard to watch, and I felt obligated to help him. I grabbed my bag with all of my laundry stuff to come to his aid and asked him if he would care for some help with the washer. He said yes, and I looked at the washer. He had no soap and was missing a quarter in the slots. As I got closer, I could smell his very potent stench of body odor coming from his laundry. I offered him a Tide Pod and gave him a quarter. He thanked me and then walked back over to the front tables. I pick up my book to start reading, and he catches the corner of my eye again, and he was taking all of his clothes off over clothes and putting them in the dryer. He was now in only a white undershirt, tank top, and his shorts. At this point, I am realizing that this man is indeed homeless and might have a few screws loose, so I should be careful. I watch him walk to the other table near the back of the store, then walk towards my table with a big trash bag and sit down on the other side of the table. I smile at him and he smiles back, showing that most of his teeth were missing and that his canines were very decayed. He starts to make small talk with me until there is an awkward silence. I can tell he's pretty lonely and just wants to talk, so yet again I feel bad for him and I try to strike up a conversation. I ask him about his military hat and he gets a flash of pride in his eye and tells me that he was a veteran who fought in Vietnam, and also starts to tell me about all the things he used to do for the military. When he was finished telling me, I told him that my stepdad was a Korean vet and I had a lot of respect for those who served, thanked him for his service. He asked me how my stepdad was and I told him he died from cancer when I was younger, but I love him very much. He looks me dead in the eye and tells me that he was sorry about my father, but I could call him daddy anytime, then puts his hat on me. I start freaking out, thinking this man has lice, so I take it off relatively calmly and hand it back to him. I wasn't sure if he was trying to be funny or not, but I told him that was making me very uncomfortable and I wanted to be left alone to my studies now. He nodded and took his bag over to the other table. A few minutes passed and the lady and her kids that were sitting to the left, and just like clockwork, he came over to sit with me again, this time without his bag. He came over and apologized to me and explained that he didn't mean to be rude and gave me a bag of candy. I tried to decline it and told him that I had a dairy allergy, which I do, but he refused and put it inside my bag of soaps. I say thank you, and he nods and sits back down. I try to ignore him, and he starts to make these noises like he's in pain to get my attention. I ask him if he was okay, and he said, "Yeah, I'm just getting a cold." I giggle, and then he tells me, "I'm sorry, but I have to tell you. You have the most beautiful red hair I've ever seen. You remind me of my girlfriend." I ask him to hold on, and I switch my clothes over to the dryer, so I ask him about his girlfriend when I return, and he tells me that she died of a heroin overdose 2 months ago. I tell him I'm sorry. He then asks if I would be his girlfriend, and without a second thought, I then try and convince him that I'm underage and that would be highly inappropriate. I am 4'11" and about 100 pounds, so I figured it would have been believable. He then tells me that he doesn't care and can keep his secret, and then touches my hand that's on the table where he sat across from me. Shivers went up my spine, and I told him, "Sorry, sir, but no, I have a boyfriend." He pulled my hand away to text my roommate to come help me now. At this point, his gaze seems rather predatory, and my heart is beating out of my chest. I put my book down inside my bag and start gathering things to get the heck out. I'm trying to be slow enough to not alarm him or provoke unwanted behavior. I was wearing a tank top and sweatpants at the time, and then comments that he can see my cleavage and that they look like nice titties and he wishes to suck on them. I stopped acknowledging him and threw my bag into the bottom of the hamper, started walking to the dryer where my clothes were, still sopping wet, and started shoveling them as fast as I could into the hamper. All during this time, he is telling me how he would take me to a hotel and do all these horribly graphic things to me if he had the money, and that he had 60 years of experience in pleasuring women. I still am trying to ignore him and have almost gotten all of my clothes. He then either picks up underwear that had fallen on the floor in my scramble or has taken from the hamper while I wasn't paying attention. The bright blue thong catches my eye, and then I look at him. I look him dead in the eye as he flicks his tongue through the space of his missing front teeth like a snake. He starts bringing my underwear to his face, which I snatch so fast it startles him. He starts hightailing it to his bag at the back of the mat, and I panic and head to the door with all of my belongings. I have never seen an old man run so damn fast. He grabs his bag and runs towards me, asking for a ride to a nearby town if I would wait for him. He grabs my shoulder and I struggle to open the door, and then I scream loudly, and I have some pipes on me. He freezes. I make it out of the door and then to my car without hearing him behind me. My guess is he was looking around the parking lot and laundromat, making sure nobody was around. I am not sure, I wasn't paying attention. I threw my laundry in the back seat, and then he started walking out to my car. He arrives at it just as I was getting in and locking my doors, asking for a ride again, pulling out my door handles, begging and crying. I leave having a total panic attack now. I get home and wake up my roommate and just start bawling my eyes out. Tell him everything that happened and made him promise me that he would go with me the next time. I'm not sure why I didn't just leave without the laundry and then come back with my roommate, and I'm not sure why I did a lot of the things that led to it. I guess it's hard to have a clear head in stressful situations. All I know is that I'm so glad that I made it out. I was walking home to my dorm after a night class a week ago. This was at around 9 o'clock at night. Not especially late, but in the dead of winter, it's pitch black and freezing. I'd love to avoid this horrible, chilly walk, but winter classes and credits and graduation and blah blah blah. Not fun stuff. So I was walking and I noticed a set of footsteps behind me. This isn't unusual per se, but they appeared suddenly as though somebody had just dropped from the sky. The footsteps sped up until suddenly there was a man walking next to me. Not right next to me. He was about 10 feet away from me physically, but we were abreast. He was above 6 foot for sure. He was white with black hair, a gray beanie, and long, spindly limbs. I'd guessed that he was in his mid to late 30s. I was already freaked out that he was walking alongside me, but what he did next shot this whole thing straight into horror movie territory. He started imitating me, I guess, is the right word for it. I'm duck-footed, and he started imitating that, but extremely exaggeratedly, walking in big lurches with his feet splayed out. I was also bundled up against the cold and hunched over, so he hunched over too. I did not know this man at all, and he didn't even crack a smile while doing this. His eyes were blank, and he had a frown on his face. I started walking a little bit faster, and then he did too, still imitating me. I don't know if he was just trying to scare me, but I knew I was alone. And I'm a tiny girl, and this guy could easily overpower me. He was mocking me specifically and mocking my fear. I must have straightened my spine subconsciously, because he threw his shoulders back and started doing this cowboy swagger thing, still with these exaggerated movements as though he were doing it underwater. I was starting to get mad, mixed with being terrified. I tried to say, "What are you doing?" sternly and loudly, but it must have been barely a whisper. I didn't stop walking. He did nothing but sort of widen his eyes a bit at me, still like he was mocking me. You might be saying, "Hey, that doesn't sound very creepy," and maybe it doesn't. At that point, I was thinking maybe this was a messed up prank, but his utter silence and the over-exaggerated jerky movements were setting me right on the edge. And finally, as we were nearing a darker area with no street lamps, I decided to do something about it. Pulled out my keychain, which has one of those self-defense thingies shaped like a cat. I slipped it on and stopped, sticking out the keychain. "If you don't stop doing that and you don't get away from me, I'm stabbing you in the eyes," I said, still in that lame whispery voice. I was so nervous that I did a little giggle and added, "I don't give a crap, man." He started swaggering towards me and I did this weird stabby motion to show him I was serious. But he didn't stop until he was like 5 feet away from me. Leaned forward a little bit, just like me, slowly reaching into his jeans pocket with one hand. Then he brought that hand forward, empty, and held his arm exactly like I was holding mine. It was weird. His arm positioned like he was holding a knife, his body looming, but there was no weapon. His eyes were crazy and angry, but he didn't do anything. He pulled back and just walked away. I'm not sure if I was in physical danger that night, but that dude scared the heck out of me. So let's not meet Mr. Mimic. A few summers ago, I was working at a front desk receptionist at a popular downtown salon. On slower evenings after the stylists finished their appointment schedule, I was occasionally left alone to book treatments and sell product until the salon closed. At this point, you're likely thinking that some creep came in one evening when I was alone to do what creeps do, but I'm actually not the victim in this story. With that being said, one evening when I was alone, a young man came in to schedule an appointment for his girl, he said. He told me that he wanted her hair colored. Every shade of red you got. I asked him what level of stylist he wanted, like how much money did he want to spend, and he said it didn't matter, he just wanted the next available appointment, which was several days later, and on my day off. He scheduled the appointment under her name, which I won't use, but I know it was a very generic sounding name. When I returned to work, I was playing around on the computer used for appointments, and I suddenly remembered the appointment I had made for that man's girl. I wondered if they had kept it. They had not. The appointment was marked as a no-show. I checked not because I had felt this man was creepy, but because I was being a judgmental ass. The young man appeared to not have a lot of money, and that color appointment would have been expensive. Judgment confirmed, and I didn't think about it again. About 3 weeks later, I am standing at the front desk, and this same man walks in with a very young girl. At the time, I guessed that she was maybe 15, and he was in his late 20s. I glanced down at the name on the next appointment, and it was not the same name the man had previously given me, but it was an equally forgettable name. They approached me, and sure enough, he was checking her in for a color appointment. I suddenly went for judgment to full-on suspicion, but this girl did not seem scared or uncomfortable at all. In fact, she seemed very sweet and a bit dreamy. And he was perfectly pleasant, just as he had been before. I checked the young girl in and alerted the stylist that her appointment had arrived. I know the color was going to take a good 2.5 hours, but the man stayed the entire time. Most of the time, he just messed with his phone and ignored everything and everyone around him. At some point, our youngest receptionist, who was 16, came on for her shift. I don't remember noting if the man noticed her, but it just seemed like suddenly he was at the other end of the counter talking to her. Couldn't hear what was being said, but the body language and facial expressions indicated a confident man flirting with a young girl, who was shy but pleased with the attention she was receiving. Having once been a shy 16-year-old girl myself, I was 23 then. My red flags and alarm bells were marching in parade all around me. When the stylist who was coloring the young girl's hair went to the back office, I followed. "So, what kind of color are you doing?" The stylist rolled her eyes and said, "I'm coloring that girl's hair about 1,000,000 shades of red." So tacky. Cue the master of ceremonies, because this parade of red flags just reached the zenith. "Yeah, she'll regret that, but she kinda seems like a nice kid." The stylist shrugged and said, "She's kind of weird. Can hardly answer a simple question." "What do you mean?" "I don't know. She's just really airheaded. Doesn't even really seem to realize what's going on." Okay, I'm uncomfortable with all of this, but what the heck can I do? Call the police and say what? So I did the damn wrong thing. I watched them leave without saying a word. Her color costed $300, and he paid for it by taking out a huge cash roll and handed me 20s. "Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day." "Yeah, you too." During this time, I was working at the salon and at a restaurant in a city that was a 50-minute drive from my apartment. The driveway was all freeway and I knew it well. The landscapes, gas stations, and mile marker signs tended to blend, so when I passed a billboard that I had passed so many times before, it shocked me when I actually processed what it said. Report human trafficking. And I knew that's exactly what that slimy freaking weirdo was doing with these young girls. I called the number and told my story. I expected bored derision from the woman at the other end. I was going on a gut feeling after all. Nope, the woman was friendly and professional and assured me it would be looked into. Alright, Treble. You were a complacent chicken shit the first time, but you did the right thing today. Let's hope somebody helps that poor girl. Oh, and don't forget to speak with your young naive coworker about that man. 2 days later, I'm back at the salon when 3 big men walk in. Alarm number 1. Their clothing was baggy and dirty and they looked rough. Number 2. 2 remained by the front door, attempting and failing to be aloof, while the biggest one walked straight toward me. Hey, is Treble here today? Why? I need to speak with her. She can't have visitors at work, and I am not able to give out her schedule. Deep sigh, and then a badge hanging from a chain on his neck slips out from under his t-shirt. I'm Officer so-and-so with the Anytown Police Department, and I need to speak with her now. I'm her. Let's go to the office. I proceed to tell and retell my story and answer a ton of questions. The officer also speaks with the stylist and my young coworker. I gave him the phone numbers that the man left for each appointment he made. They were different, and then the 3 undercover officers left. It's over. They took me seriously and they'll catch that piece of shit. But they're back the next day, along with the man who's in plain clothes but openly wearing his badge. The same officer walks up to the counter and shows me a piece of paper. Is this her? He asks. I don't really know what I'm looking at except to say that it's an advertisement of some sort. It's 2 black and white pictures of a young girl in nothing but a thong, and text is covered by the officer's hand. Also, I'm not sure if it's her. The girl in this picture looks very similar, but a lot heavier. I tell the officer this, and he says impatiently, well, what if she lost weight? Yeah, I guess it could be her then. Then Officer so-and-so and this new guy follow me back to the office and ask me a few more questions. I'm able to ask the officer if they located her, and he tells me that they have. He goes so far as to tell me that other undercover officers are headed to a hotel staying at that very moment. I said, that's great, or something like that. The officer then asked me why I decided to call the tip line, and I told him that the whole thing just didn't seem right. He made some joke about offering me a job because they needed more people who acted on instinct. So movie-like, right? He then said that as soon as the sting was over, he was going to make sure I was given proper recognition. Joy turned to fear, and I was suddenly deep into my first realization that some cops are idiots who can't be trusted, and that I too am an idiot. What? No, I don't want recognition. I want to stay anonymous. Well, that's too bad because you deserve to be rewarded. No. And another realization that this officer has my full name, phone number, and place of employment written down in his stupid little notebook. What happens to your notes? I asked him. Officer Weirdo responds like this. Don't worry, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've never lost an informant. What the heck does that even mean? I'm not an informant. I'm some dumbass who called an anonymous tip line. Officer Jerk has to leave, but Badge Man stays. Oh, I didn't mention who he was. Special Agent Go Screw Yourself with the Attorney General's office. And guess what? He's proud of me. He wishes more people cared like I do, and he also has my phone number. What happens next is obvious. I get mono, and I'm begging to finally get some sleep, and then I get a phone call from the salon manager. Treble, there's 2 TV news crews here, and some newspaper reporters too. We are playing dumb, but maybe it's a good thing you got sick. Do they know my name? I ask. No. I put in numerous calls to the officer and special agent and received no response, but I thought they were proud of me. The officer had given me 2 numbers, one to an office and one to a cell phone. After 2 days, the cell phone no longer worked. It had been answered once by a woman who promptly hung up on me, and the officer was never available when I called. The special agent returned my call some days later. Finally, he wanted a written statement. Go screw yourself. He couldn't understand why I was being so uncooperative. Finally, he threatened me with a subpoena. You want to subpoena somebody who called an anonymous tip line? He called me a few more times, but I didn't answer. Ultimately, I had to drag my sick ass to my favorite professor's office because he also happened to be a good attorney. I felt incredibly uncomfortable asking for his advice. I felt I was definitely crossing a line, but I was desperate and very scared. I had now seen this story all over the news along with the words, "an employee at a local business." Long story short, Professor Awesome helped me. Special agent stopped calling me and the man was arrested and charged with a number of things, including human trafficking. But he was released and I don't know what happened after that. I'm not scared anymore, but I was looking over my shoulder the entire summer. This happened to me over a decade ago, but I'll never forget the feeling deep in my chest, both that night and the next morning when the true nature of the situation became apparent. It was late December in a small Texas town. We had just received 5 inches of snow earlier in the day. I can't remember what time it was. All I remember is it was dark out and I was playing in my room. It's important to note that my room is made up of 2 rooms, a mud room with a door leading to our front, then my actual bedroom. The door was an older style wood door with all the old hardware and had a window on the top half. It had a window shade, but that wouldn't stop anyone from looking in if they wanted. Our room was the frontmost, with my parents' room being in the back of the house. I was in the mud room playing with my Hot Wheels when I felt something weird, like somebody was watching me. I was facing the door at this point and looked right up in the window. I was trying to focus on the little openings left by the window shade. I started looking for any reason to feel unsafe and run. After a while, I was sure that there was nothing, so I went back to playing. A few minutes later, I got the feeling again. This time, I didn't want to look at the door, but instead moved to where my back was now to the door. I was just hoping that it was all in my head. Just then, the most terrifying thing happened. There was a noise at the door, like the doorknob had been touched. I was still turned around, back facing the door. I was completely frozen at the metal-on-metal sound of the doorknob. It was moving. I didn't know how or why, but it was moving slowly, turning and testing the lock. I wanted to move, but I was frozen. It was like somebody glued every joint in my body. My chest felt like a car was parked on it. My parents had been in their shower all the way back at the house, leaving me at the front all alone, with the only room lit up being mine. Suddenly, the knob was not being gently moved. Somebody was turning it with force. This door was one that had to be locked with a skeleton key so the knob could turn and open freely. Luckily, there were 2 deadbolts. Whoever was on the other side just figured out the knob was free to open. As soon as I heard the knob turn all the way, I sprung up to the wall about 5 feet from the door, and back to the wall. The door fell silent, and I found myself glued to the wall, unable to move. Then the knob turned slowly. I remember watching, waiting for it to turn all the way. When it did, whoever was on the other side of the door started trying to budge the door and pry it. At first it was easy going, but then they started pounding into the door with their foot. They only got 2 kicks in when I unfroze and screamed for my life. I sprinted to the back of the house to get my parents, and they asked me what was wrong, and I said somebody tried to break in. They ran and checked, and, not bothering to look outside though, I pleaded with them to go check. They just said my imagination was running wild, and it was with an animal or the old age of the house. They took one final look in my mudroom, not bothering to investigate any further. I was told to go to bed. It took me hours. I don't even remember falling asleep. All I remember is staring at the door from my bed, never taking my eyes off the doorknob. Suddenly, I was woken up by my parents, who were obviously distressed and seemed to be scared. My mom grabbed me by both shoulders and got right in front of me. She asked me very sternly what I thought somebody was trying to break in. When I told them this time, they seemed to listen. I was worried how serious they were as they asked me about everything. When I was done, they said they had to show me something. Took me to the front door and out to the front yard and pointed to my door near the driveway. You could clearly see the boot prints in the snow walking along the street, through our yard and straight to my window, and then my mud where I had been the night prior. The police showed up and took a report, but nothing ever came of it, and I was never able to sleep well in that house. I can never forget what it felt like to go through this as a child, and to not have my parents believe me. But I'm just glad I wasn't home alone, and I'm very thankful for those deadbolts. About 2 years ago, I was 18 at the time. I worked at a spa in the downtown area of my city. It was nice because I lived just up the street in some apartment building, so I was able to walk to and from work, thus using much less gas. Working at a spa, I was used to weirdos, but this day was especially odd. Now before I continue, I should tell you about Horse. He was this homeless man that walked around downtown a lot. He usually wore jean shorts, an unbuttoned vest, snakeskin boots, and a cowboy hat. He hardly spoke any English. I'm not sure what his real name is. We always just called him Horse. My boss told me that he got the name from the police around town because They would get calls of a naked drunk man running around, and when they got there, they noticed he was hung like a horse, so to speak. He'd gotten better lately, and they didn't get calls about him anymore. Everybody said he was pretty harmless actually, and he looked it too. Anyways, just like every other day, I left my place and started walking to work, not knowing that when I got there, my boss was going to have me stay late. See, the building my boss was renting got expensive, so he decided to buy his own building only 3 doors down, and every day after work, some of us would walk over and work on it. It meant working 13 hours some days, but hey, I was getting paid for it. Everyone left earlier than me because once I started painting, I didn't want to stop. It was already 9:30 when I started locking up that night, and I was locking the office door. I noticed somebody standing outside the front door made of all glass. Never feeling worried in the area, I just put it off as a nosy passerby, but decided to leave out through the back anyways. I started walking home, and I heard the sound of heels clicking behind me. I picked up my pace, and so did the noise behind me. I looped around and ran back to the spot, as there are more street lights and an alarm system. I called a coworker that didn't live far away, and she came to pick me up so I could stay with her. I felt safe but uneasy. The next day at work, I told my boss I wasn't comfortable staying late unless I was told early so that I could bring my car. He understood and said he would make sure to let me know and keep an eye out for anyone stalky looking. That same day after lunch, Horst came through the door. It wasn't uncommon because he would come in and get free coffee or whatever that we had sitting out all the time. Today he walked straight into the desk, though it was me and 2 other girls sitting there. But we had Kelly talk to him since only she spoke Spanish. She let him talk for a second, him looking at me the whole time, before she yelled something angrily back. He calmly said something else, winked, and walked out. I asked Kelly what he said, and she kept refusing to tell me, not wanting to repeat the words. I got it out of her, regrettably so. He apparently said, I just wanted to come tell that Six that her ass looked good in her work pants last night and that she'd be a great F. I felt sick remembering last night before the feeling faded into confusion as to why he called me Six. My apartment number. He knows where I live. I felt my stomach turn, and I swallowed, asking what else he said before leaving. It was something about how the rumors of how he got his name were true. I felt so violated. I stayed with my friend for the next couple of days while I helped my boyfriend move into my apartment. He lived 3 hours away but decided that he would feel better living with me after hearing about the whole ordeal. I definitely felt safer with him there. I know I should have called the cops, but it seemed useless. He was just a drunk, and I knew he'd be released shortly after going in. He did stop following me and showing up at my work, but I would still see him watching me some days. I've moved since and got a new job. I know it could have been much worse, but Horst, let's not meet again. This all happened when I was in high school in the late 90s. I grew up in a rural western town. That meant not much to do in town, but lots of places out in the heavily wooded canyons and hills right outside of town. One particularly popular spot for hanging out, hiking, rock climbing, and doing various other things is called Falling Rock. It's right along the rim of Dark Canyon, already spooking sounding enough, and features pine woods going from a highway straight out to a sharp, abrupt drop-off down a sandstone and limestone cliff. It's several hundred feet down to the creek at the bottom, and there are various hiking trails and ways to get around the cliffs and down to the creek. I went there frequently with friends in high school, not to smoke weed or drink or whatever, but because the place was also held as sacred by the Lakota, and by proxy by teenaged wannabe Wiccans like me. We'd see their red prayer bundles up in the cedars all along the cliffs, and to me and my coven of fellow dumbasses, that made this an obvious place to visit and try to contact spirits and whatnot. I hiked it enough to become very familiar with the area, especially with the deep overhang that was almost like a shallow cave. It wasn't visible from the top of the cliff or from the main hiking trails. I only learned about it after somebody else showed me how to get to it by scooting down a steep incline between 2 particular pine trees on my butt. Also, during this very confused time of my life, I had a best friend who was an extremely bad influence and kept getting me involved with older guys. At 15, I lost my virginity to a 22-year-old guy in the Air Force that she had introduced me to, and then left me alone with. I won't say he made me do anything, but I also won't say I was entirely on board with everything that happened. She later gave me away for a night to a Turkish guy who spoke no English. Then, she started seeing a guy in his early 20s. She was 18 and more or less told this 40-something uncle that I was all his if he wanted me. I was a 16-year-old idiot, didn't know about this scheme, just knew my best friend had just invited me to Falling Rock to hang out with her and her boyfriend. I was less happy when I showed up and found the uncle there. I had met him before. He wasn't a jerk or unattractive. Actually, he was attractive, or even especially creepy. It was just knowing he was more than twice my age, and it was very clearly wanting more than the Air Force guy had. He just didn't want sex. He was in love with me and wanted me to love him too. I knew it, I just didn't know what the heck to do about it. But I did tell my friend that I didn't want to see him around when she and I got together. She apparently ignored that bit of what I said. He and my best friend's boyfriend were both cowboys, following the rodeo circuit. As such, they showed up at Falling Rock in their boots and hats and all of that, and it made them slow. My friend was morbidly obese, and none of them knew anything about Falling Rock, whereas I knew the whole area very well. I had driven my own vehicle there, but had parked in the lower lot, about a quarter mile closer to the highway than the place where they'd parked theirs. When I saw that the uncle was there, and he started getting overly friendly right away, I planned to get away as soon as possible. We started walking, and it wasn't long before I got way out ahead of them, ignored their calls to come back, and vanished into the woods down one of the last used hiking paths. This was broad daylight, and I had a plan. I was going to just loop around to the northwest, through the thick woods, and come back up to the lower parking lot, get in my car and drive away, and let my friend explain why she brought the uncle later. I made good time and got up towards the main road to the parking area, where my friend and the uncle had parked. I was almost there when I saw another dude, close to the uncle in age, but slimmer, blonde with a beard and a camouflage coat on, come up the trail from the parking area. We were a few hundred yards from each other, but he stopped, clearly seeing me. I don't know what it was, but I didn't like something about his stance or his expression. I don't know what. I started to slink back down the draw I had come up, and he started to follow me. No mistake about this. He turned off a well-worn obvious path to the Falling Rock cliff face to follow me, little teenage girl, down into nothing but deer trails and scrub and cacti. He didn't say anything all the while. It seemed like he was trying to be as quiet as possible. I knew the area better than he did, though, and was a lot less cautious about my footing. I got back up to the top of the cliffs as quick as I could and popped up just ahead of where the uncle was sauntering along the edge, right next to where the big overhang would be. The uncle and I saw each other. I pointed back down the trail where the strange guy with the beard could clearly be heard stomping up behind me, and then I dropped down on my ass and boot scooted right out of sight. I got into the overhang and heard over my head this exchange between the uncle and bearded guy. "Hey, what the heck do you think you're doing?" asks the uncle, sounding absolutely mad. "I'm looking for my girlfriend. She just came up here." "Dark hair?" says the other guy. "Oh yeah? What color shirt is she wearing?" I was wearing a gray hoodie with my dad's college logo on it. "Gray," called the bearded guy. The uncle proceeded to go absolutely batshit, yelling and cursing, and, based on the noise, throwing fallen tree limbs at the other guy. The other guy just ran. I could hear him thumping and crashing down the steep hillside not far from me. My friend's boyfriend came running when he heard all the noise, and I could hear him yelling at the guy too. All kinds of vile stuff you wouldn't think a good Christian boy would say. The uncle called my name for a bit before I finally came out of the cave, and then my fat friend finally joined us too. It was a weird day to have your sort of stalker save you from somebody who seemed to really have it out for you, but I'm pretty sure that's just what he did. I wish I could say I did something better by him, but all I did was disappear. I didn't talk to my quote-unquote friend for over a year, long enough for her to have dumped her boyfriend and for the uncle to have gone away with him. I don't know what's happened to either of them, or if I could even recognize them now that I'm twice the age I was then. I do wish them well, and I just hope to not meet, our history considering. Still, I'd rather meet the uncle, who was always a gentleman, than that blonde bearded guy I saw that day. You. Yeah, let's not meet. This happened 5 years ago when I was 14. I went shopping with my friend in the city. When we finished, we met up with her mom so she could drive us back instead of taking the subway again. However, they lived like 20 minutes away from where I did, and I guess her mom didn't feel like driving to my house, so instead, they dropped me off at the bus station, and from there I would get home. I had to wait about 20 to 15 minutes or so before getting on the bus, so I sat on a bench and played around on my phone, kind of salty that I wasn't dropped off at my house and that I had to take the bus alone. At this time, I had just started using city buses, so I was pretty stressed every time I had to use them alone. Then a man comes up to me and tells me, "Hey, how are you? Have we met before?" I look at this 45 to 50-year-old man and know for a fact I've never met him. I was really wondering, where would I, a 14-year-old boy, ever seen and interacted with this man? Tell him no, and he tells me, "So, are you sure? Didn't we meet at some random guy's named party?" I said, "Nope, definitely not. I don't even know who that is, sorry. He proceeds to sit next to me, very closely, and introduces himself. Well then, hi, my name is blank, nice to meet you. My bus was driving by, so I didn't hear his name, which was very unfortunate as I needed that information later on. I tell him, nice to meet you, I'm blank, and shake his hand. He asks where I'm headed. I tell him home, and then he asks me where it is. I tell him close. Asks me my age, and I tell him the truth. I'm 14. To which he replies, oh, you're not old enough to have sex yet. That really wasn't the reply I was expecting. At this point, I became extremely nervous, so I just started giggling at the situation. I nervously tell him, yeah, no, not really. He tells me that it's unfortunate, and I just smile, looking at the people around me to see if anyone is noticing what's going on. He asks me, do you speak Spanish? You look Latino, and I honestly reply, yes, I do. This is like my fourth mistake after telling him my real name, destination, and age. He switches from French to Spanish and whispers in my ear. It's unfortunate you're so young because you're so beautiful. Your smile, your eyes, your eyelashes, they all arouse me. I feel like a cat in heat just by looking at you. I'm getting so hard, he said. I'm giggling a little less now but still smiling. The situation was so weird. I'm avoiding eye contact while I feel his hand on my thigh. He then grabs my chin to turn my head and make me look at him. Why are you looking away? Let me look at you. He then asks me, are you into guys? I tell him no, sorry, I'm not. I actually am, but this is when I finally decide to start lying. And he asks me if I'm sure. I reply yes, I'm sure, while putting my iPhone with its pink case in my pocket to hide the evidence. He says, that's too bad. I really would have liked to get to know you. Would you add me on Facebook and we could get to know each other? And I just tell him, I'm sorry, I'd rather not. He doesn't push any further and takes off. After that, I immediately text my friend what just happened and she freaks out. I get on the bus, arrive home, and tell my parents everything that just happened. My dad is infuriated and tells me we're going to the police, so we drive to the police station and start filing the report. This is where the man's name would have been useful, but I really didn't manage to hear it. Later that night, the officer called me for follow-up questions and told me they'd recently had frequent reports of a man talking to young boys in the area. After that day, nothing else happened. I always take the city buses, and my college is actually right next to the bus station. Yet, I've never encountered that disturbing man again. If I do, I really hope he doesn't come talk to me again. I'll try to handle this situation much better, but still, what a creep. I was 18 years old and I worked in a mall clothing store. I usually worked the night shift, which meant leaving the store between 9 o'clock and 9:30 p.m. None of us thought anything about calling out goodnight and walking out to our cars alone. Usually, the parking lot was full of the other workers leaving at the same time. On this particular night, I was in a great mood. I had had a good evening at work and was going to meet up with my boyfriend when I got home, so I was just smiling and thinking to myself as I walked. I got to the curb in front of the mall exit door to check for oncoming cars before I crossed over to where my car was parked. It was not that far away, maybe 10 spaces from the front. When I glanced up to verify where my car was, I caught the eyes of a man sitting in his truck. He was wearing a cowboy hat pulled down low over his eyes, as though trying to conceal his face, but he was staring intently right at me. I literally froze in place, and I have never felt like I did in that moment. I snapped out of my trance and I ran as fast as I could past his truck into my car, which was only a few spaces away. This was before key fobs, so I needed my key to unlock the door. I always made fun of scary movies when the girl ran and dropped the keys trying to get in, but it really does happen that way. I was shaking so badly that I couldn't get the key in the door, and then I dropped the damn thing. I felt like I was in a bad movie. Seconds later, I was sitting in the car and shaking so badly I had to sit there for a moment or two before I could drive off. He had not chased after me. He did not leave, but continued to sit there. Later in the evening, after I had finally calmed down, I felt like an idiot thinking I had gotten scared of someone's husband picking up his wife after work. The next day I went back to work, the same night shift, and told everybody at work what happened and how scared I had been. I made fun of myself for being such a chicken, but I also made sure that somebody walked out with me later that night. I stood at the door of the mall ready to run back in if I saw anything off, but he was not there. I exhaled and my friend and I went to our cars, relieved that everything was alright. The following day at work, there was no talk of my fright from 2 nights ago, and it was business as usual. About halfway into my shift, the manager walked up to me and said she needed to speak with me. She turned around and walked up to a cop that I had not noticed was in the store. Curious, I walked over and my manager wanted me to tell the cop about what had happened. I felt silly telling him for some reason because nothing had really happened. When I finished telling him my story, he started asking questions about the truck. Did I know what model it was, or the exact color? Did I know the year? I finally said something about how I did not want to get anyone in trouble and that I had just freaked out a little bit and it was no big deal. The cop then explained that the night before, one of the ladies leaving for the night had been kidnapped, driven around to the back of the mall into an unlit area, and had been beaten and raped. I felt myself get lightheaded, and my vision went back for a moment, with it dawning on me that I had seen this guy. My description of the truck matched the description of the victims. Our guy was not wearing a cowboy hat. That was the only difference in our description. That was the beginning. Our city now has a serial rapist, and it took them years to finally catch him. His wife figured out it was her husband and turned him in. That was a scary time, and women were terrified to be alone after dark. At our mall, and I imagine the others as well, no one was allowed to leave alone. The mall parking lot was now lit up 360, and they had security on site making sure we were all safe. We also started a chain call between the stores to let another know if you saw anyone that made you suspicious or frightened, so that everyone would be on guard. I always felt guilty for that woman being attacked. The situation is still developing and I'm afraid for my mom's safety. We have reported it to the police and they have patrolled the area a few times but don't seem to be taking it too seriously. If you have any suggestions or theories, I would greatly appreciate it. My mom and I live alone in the rural Midwest. Closest neighbors are about a mile away. Thursday morning, my mom walked to her car to find small pieces of paper blowing around in the grass around her car and a bag sitting on top. The notes are very disturbing and sexually graphic. Some of them imply that he is watching her and that he can see her at the very moment. Inside the bag, 2 glass dildos. She is not a very social person and she doesn't have any enemies or even friends who would do this. She reported it to the police right away. One of our neighbors drove by our house that same morning and noticed a man in his 20s, with rotting teeth and brown hair, walking down our gravel road away from our house. They asked him his business and he claimed to be waiting for a ride, indicating his car had broken down or something. That night, a man fitting that description knocked on our door. One that we never used, by the way. She was alone, so she turned the lights off and called the police. They didn't arrive for 45 minutes. She said he was wearing a large black cowboy hat and carrying 2 large bags. He looked similar to our neighbor's description, but this time he was close enough for her to notice freckles. A little while ago, we noticed he had been in the garage and stolen 2 full gas cans. There are a lot of outbuildings and land, trees and hills for him to hide. My house has a lot of windows. We have begun keeping the doors locked and windows/curtains shut. I am paranoid and terrified. My mom is mostly just mad, but she shouldn't have to feel unsafe in her own home. What do we do, and why would a person do this? I will also respond to questions as I can. I also can provide pictures of the notes and the contents of the bag if there is interest. I appreciate any feedback. Update. Nothing seems to be out of place this morning, but I will be walking around the property and thoroughly checking before I leave. I have been writing all of this on my phone, so when I get my computer back, I will try to respond to more of you. I asked my brother to come home today and he said he would, but apparently she talked him out of it now. I'm very upset that nobody seems to be taking this too seriously. The garage has been padlocked, but there is still a barn, corn crib, and basement that he could easily access. I tried again to get her to leave and she flat out refuses. She is convinced that because he didn't actually try to break into the house that night when he knocked on the door, that he is not a threat or will give up. She doesn't want to be freaked out, so to speak, and I don't blame her, but it's too late for that. She's getting mad at me for asking questions, and I know she would be pissed at this point if she found out. About this post, that is. This guy has been seen around town and nobody knows him, which is a red flag itself. His license plate is from the next county over, but nobody got the number. Of course. I want to be proactive about this, but there is only so much I can do right now. Thank you all for the advice and feedback. It has been unsettling to consider all these possibilities, but I believe it's important in a situation like this. I will be creating a new post for any future updates because this is getting a little lengthy. Thank you all again from the bottom of my heart. Final update, perhaps. Nothing has happened since those first few days to my knowledge. We are still here and things seem to have settled down a bit. Got a lock for the garage, although she doesn't always keep it locked. And the gun is out. At this point, I really think this was mistaken identity, or at least an easily discouraged crazy person. I really appreciate the concern and advice. I didn't expect this to get so many responses. Fortunately, the guy has not been caught, and I am home alone a lot now. I never used to be afraid. I hate that he took that from me. I'll be sure to update you guys if anything changes. Thanks again.